What's happening, everyone? We are back with what is actually a bit of a last-minute review. Today, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Season 4 VHS, Thomas and the Special Letter. Now, a lot of people have really praised this particular tape, and it's become a noticeable fan favorite. But, with that being said, just how good of a lineup does this tape have to offer? Is it really the best of Season 4? Well, we will find out. But first, let's quickly talk about the release history. Thomas and the Special Letter was originally released on VHS on August 15, 1995 by Anchor Bay Entertainment. This tape was the first to mark off a few things. 1. The 1995 release did not display any home media logo, as Anchor Bay did not officially have an on-screen logo. So while the Video Treasures logo was still being used, the tape automatically starts with the Britt Allcroft logo. Also, the original version with the Anchor Bay logo came in the 95 box. This means that it was released sometime in 2000, but the later 99 to 07 style covers weren't released until sometime in 2002, if I have this correct. Anchor Bay then released the VHS for the second time on February 2nd, 1999. This, of course, resulted in a Beth Allcroft label and a later blue sticker label. A little over a year later, on February 29, 2000, the VHS was released for the third time. And as you can tell, these were the blue and black ink labels. 2 years later, on March 5, 2002, Anchor Bay re-released Special Letter, but with a brand new cover. As shown here, this cover shows a full-blown pic of Birdie, which to me is a very odd choice, because Birdie doesn't really have that much to do with this tape. I honestly don't know what the decision was here. And also, a prototype cover was made with the same pictures, but the lettering is only slightly different. It's not terrible, but the later one is better. 5 years later, on March 20th, 2007, came the first DVD release. This one also marked off a few things as well. It was the final of the Anchor Bay DVDs to feature a character at the top and a scene from an episode on the bottom, the last DVD to feature the episodes on the back cover, the last to use the 2003 Anchor Bay logo, and the final to feature Robin Smith's narrations for the menus. And finally, sometime in 2009, Lionsgate re-released the DVD. Don't forget, you can also find Special Letter paired on the 2-in-1 pack with James Goes Buzz Buzz, and a ton of different wooden railway packs. So, that wraps up the history. Now, let's take a look at the episodes. So, Thomas and the Special Letter features 6 stories from Season 4, all narrated by George Carlin. Our story stops are Thomas and the Special Letter, Home at Last, Rock and Roll, Steamroller, Toad Stands By, and Bowled Out. Let's begin with Thomas and the Special Letter. A little girl writes to Thomas and his friends if they can come and visit in the big city. In the midst of his excitement, Thomas has an accident, but is soon repaired, and all of the engines head off to the marvelous occasion. This story is absolutely golden. The fact that this is the 100th episode of the show, I think speaks for itself. This is a wonderful story, simply about a little girl wanting to meet Thomas and the rest of the engines. Now, this may or may not sound crazy, but if we really wanted to look at this on a much deeper level, just think of how inclusive this episode actually is. I'm not specifically talking about the insane cast of characters used in this story, but how we, the audience, feel sort of involved with this event. It's almost like, in a way, we too are getting to meet Thomas. When Topham says this line here,
"It seems," continued Sir Topham Hatt, "that there are many girls and boys who would like to meet you."
just think about how powerful that sounds for a moment. Imagine how many children have wanted to actually meet Thomas, or Percy and Edward and James. It's almost like we're now having that opportunity by feeling as if we too are involved with this big event. This is also what I believe is where we see Thomas at one of his humblest moments, slightly getting another big-headed ego moment and getting put in his place by his own doing.
Then Thomas made his mistake. Just like this, he boasted.
With With the damage that was done to his front, he could have easily missed out on this trip. And oomph, the amount of kids that he would have let down. That would have sucked. But luckily, it didn't go that way, and he was able to leave with the others. Overall, I can totally see why this is a big favorite amongst fans. The concept is wholesome, visually it's pretty, and the music is beautiful as always. One of many perfect episodes of Season 4. 10 out of 10. The second episode is Home at Last. When Skarloey returns home from the works, he hears about a new engine called Duncan, who likes to rock and roll on the rails as he does his work. This inevitably leads him into trouble as Skarloey is sent to push Duncan from getting stuck in a tunnel. This one is okay for the most part. It's a nice subtle reintroduction for Skarloey coming back from the events of Four Little Engines. Amazing how he wasn't present in only 3 previous stories, and now here he is again, all fresh and new, ready to get back to work. I also like the small reminder from the events that literally just happened with Peter Sam's big accident in the episode Trucks. I honestly would have loved to see more of Skarloey's raw reaction to the whole story. But anyways, our somewhat focus is on our new character Duncan, who in this story, we don't really have that much to go off of. The only things we know are that he came as a spare engine, and he's apparently careless when he works. Because, of course, this kind of behavior is bound to get him in some kind of trouble, as evident here when he gets himself stuck in the tunnel.
I'm a plain, blunt engine. I speak as I find. Tunnels should be tunnels and not rabbit holes. This railway is no good at all.
I'm also giving big props to George Carlin here for his take on Duncan. It's one of many of my favorite voices he does. But now I want to quickly talk about the ending, when Duncan is told off by Topham. First off, I don't think I've ever seen him get this pissed at one of his engines. I mean, that face clearly says it all. And let's not forget this lovely line.
If it happens again, he ended ominously, I shall find ways to cut you down to size. In other words, your career is on the line. Need I say more?
Did he just nonchalantly say that he would scrap Duncan? Damn, that took a turn to the dark side really quick. Overall, not one of the best narrow gauge stories I've seen personally, but it does have its good points here and there. I'm ranking it a 7.5 out of 10. Next episode is Rock and Roll. While Rusty is repairing some of the line, he warns Duncan about one remaining bad bit. Duncan refuses to listen, and while trying to find a way to send Rusty packing, he carelessly rocks and rolls himself off the rails. Now this is a nice pickup from the last episode. I really like how this story dives into the lessons of safety and listening to helpful advice. For being the new guy, Rusty clearly knows a thing or two about railway safety. But of course, this doesn't mean anything to Duncan. This shows a little character development for him, as we get to see just how careless he actually is. First, he makes a very racial-sounding comment that he doesn't need to take advice from quote-unquote smelly diesels.
Rusty warned Duncan about the bad bit of rail. Huh. I know my way about. I don't need smelly diesels to tell me what to do. Rusty felt hurt.
And the next moment, his ego is inflated when James adds more to the confusion.
You poor engine, sympathized James. I know all about diesels. One crept into our yard and ordered us about. I soon sent him packing. Duncan was filled with admiration. He didn't know that James was boastful and sometimes didn't tell the truth.
This also showcases some development for Rusty, that he's not just a wise engine, but it is he who ultimately rescues Duncan, despite being insulted by him earlier. If he really wanted to, Rusty could have turned around and said, nah, screw you. But that quick turnaround after Skarloey mentions the passengers just proves how Rusty can be very reliable in a time of need. And even when that's all said and done, the ending to this is very heartwarming when we see Duncan apologize to Rusty for his bad behavior, because this shows that Duncan has learned a sense of humility, and next time will do a better job of listening to someone's advice. Although there is something else that kind of strikes me. Topham mentioned that if Duncan acted out again, his career would be on the line, no? Did he actually mean that? Or was this just a scare tactic to pull Duncan's head out of his non-existent ass? I don't know. I guess you could draw your own conclusion from that. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty solid enough story, and possibly one of my favorites for Duncan. 8.5 out of 10. Up next we have Steamroller. When Sir Handel brags about his steamroller wheels, Skarloey tries to make him see sense by telling him about George the Steamroller. But this causes the two to clash, ultimately resulting in an accident George deliberately causes. I think, in all honesty, this might just be my favorite Sir Handel story. Again, we have here a theme of arrogance and pride. The way I look at it, George and Sir Handel are very similar to each other. Both think that they're better than one another in some way, but of course, this leads them to bat heads with the way that they think. George for being more anti-rail, claiming that railways are no good, and Sir Handel for thinking he is faster than any steamroller or fellow engine. Either way, the conflict between these two shows how much karma can be a real bitch sometimes. I mean, Sir Handel had very little to no room to maneuver, and George was totally in the wrong for deliberately causing the accident, because then he ended up facing the consequences for his actions. But Sir Handel too was also put in his place after he bragged about getting rid of George, and by a group of young boys no less.
They pointed to the engine and cried, "Look, here's Sir Handel. He tried to race a steamroller, but the steamroller nearly beat him." Sir Handel never mentions steamrollers now.
Overall, I'd say this is a pretty entertaining watch for what it tried to do with the clash of older and newer technologies of the railway. A solid 9 out of 10. And up next is Toad Stands By. Scruffy and the other freight cars continuously tease Oliver for not being able to manage cars. But with some help from Toad, Oliver gains the upper hand and the cars soon learn to respect him. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but I think this is the standout episode of Season 4. This story is fantastic and definitely another of my personal favorites. I love this episode for a number of reasons. For one, the theme. I never really noticed this before, but this story actively shows the impact of bullying, as displayed when the cars tease Oliver.
Oliver's no use at all, thinks he's very clever, says that he can manage us, that's the best joke ever. When he orders us about with the greatest folly, we just push him down the well. Up goes old Ollie.
But this also dives into the topics of learning respect and the power dynamics between steam engines and freight cars. Another reason why I love this are the characters. I already liked Oliver, but just seeing him show his strength on what he can and will do to the freight cars is like, whoa. But let's not forget, he never would have had that confidence had it not been for the MVP of this episode, Toad. Again, not sure if this has ever been pointed out, but Toad gains some major character development here. Only he knew how these demented cars worked, and through his clever cunning and intelligence, was he able to devise this very well thought out plan to have Oliver get the one-up on them, even if it meant to the extent of breaking one of them. If that alone doesn't earn not only Oliver, but Toad some major respect here, I don't know what does. The narration for both dubs of this story is the final reason. I love both George Carlin and Michael-Angelos' take on it, even if I find myself admitting that Angelos does a slightly better job making Scruffy, in particular, sound like he's in actual pain while being torn apart.
Well, Scruffy. I'm coming apart!
Again, this episode is amazing. Another one of Season 4's finest. 10 out of 10. And our final episode is Bowled Out. With Stepney's visit coming to an end, Topham brings in a new diesel to help out the engines. But whilst trying to prove himself, the diesel backfires and Duck and Stepney are sent to save the day to pull an important express train. So with this one, we're back to dealing with the conflict of steam versus diesel, in which our new character, D261, or more appropriately named Bowler, openly mocks the engines by saying they're out of date and should be scrapped.
It's not your fault, but Sir Topham Hatt should scrap you and get engines like me. A fill of oil, a touch on the starter, and I'm off. No bother, no waiting. They have to fuss round you for hours before you're ready.
This is another instance where a newbie is acting arrogant for their beliefs. Diesels are not always cracked up to be. They too have their downfalls, as displayed when he sucks in the inspector's hat through his air intake.
Then it happened. Shaking and spluttering, the diesel stopped. Meanwhile, the inspector was looking for his hat. The diesel seethed with fury as Duck and Stepney pushed him back to the shed. "My hat!" exclaimed the inspector. "You sucked it through your air intake."
But what I really like is how Stepney and Duck take over despite their annoyance. I mean, think of it this way. This was Stepney's final full day on Sodor, and then his farewell was soon overshadowed by this new diesel who has no respect for steam engines. Stepney could have turned around and said he didn't want to help, but he isn't that kind of character, which shows us, through his perspective, the importance of friendship and teamwork, while also emphasizing that modern machinery is not always superior. And even though Stepney leaving is very bittersweet, I love it when episodes like this leave us with the thought that even when the Sodor engines may get on each other's nerves every once in a while, they have this unwavering ability to overcome any challenge that is thrown at them. That is something to really be admired. A very satisfying ending to not only Stepney's arc, but for the closing episode of this release. 9 out of 10. But of course, to close everything off, we have our bonus music video, Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover. As you all know, this is not only my favorite song of Season 4, but for the entirety of the classic series. This song is a freaking bop, and one hell of an earworm, I might add. I think it truthfully provides us with one of the most important morals to teach kids in Thomas. And what better way to showcase that than through the quintessential episode that is Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow. I could listen to this song on loop all day if I could. Definitely one of the best Thomas songs from the classic series. So what do I think about Thomas and the Special Letter? This is a very solid Season 4 tape. Normally, little kid me would never think twice about some of these episodes. They were kinda there for the most part. But now I actually see that there are some really deeper meanings behind certain ones. Episodes like Home at Last, Rock and Roll, Bowled Out. Again, ones that I always seemed to glance over as a child and thought nothing of. I never would have thought in a million years that some of these episodes would go on to become some of my favorites, or that I now look at them in a much different light. In fact, I think this tape may just be up there with really good ones, such as Gallant Old Engine for me. Every episode on here is charming in its own right, and it's tied up even nicer with what I think is one of the best Thomas songs. I can totally understand why this is considered one of the GOAT VHS tapes of Season 4 by some fans. I highly recommend it. And that's gonna conclude this review. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more reviews and other Thomas-related content. And be sure to check out my other reviews in the playlist down below in the description. Until then, I will see you all in the next video.